passages should be clutter-free and over 70% of employees should be trained in firefighting. Fire hydrants with adequate water storage and fire escape route trolleys should be available. This action used to be immediately taken. So the state government ministry has instructed concerned people, even though earlier there is only 40% of the employees should be trained, but now they felt that 70% of the employees supposed to be trained in the firefighting system. The second, the Tribune, reason for shown, it shows that 30% of Gurgaon high-rises buildings are not compliant. They come to know, so ordered the audit and to produce the report. Another example, the recent past, there was a fire occurred in the high-rise building of Delhi. So due to that, almost 27 lives has lost. Now they realize that 50,000 factories are not accounted. That means 50,000 factories are not taken Fire NOC. Over 10 lakh workers in Delhi, they are in the verge of anytime anything may happen due to fire. If the fire NOC is not taken, the control will be very difficult. They realized. So it shows how much important fire compliance in India we can realize very well. Fire is a chemical reaction. It creates the heat, but however, fire is sometimes called rapid oxidation. Even though the fire is a natural phenomenon, many ecosystems benefit from periodic fires because they clear out dead organic materials. Wildfires, destructive forces, but they can occur naturally. It can reduce the risk, but when it becomes uncontrollable, it's going to be a big disaster to the nearby cities or villages. Always, we realize that forest fires help in the natural cycle of woods. It clears dead trees, leaves, and competing vegetation from the forest floor, so new plants can grow. It is important to understand the background of the fire services in India. If you see almost after the independence, if you see 1958 onwards, even though regarding the fire, it was given to the each and every state under the bylaws to ensure, but the fire services in India are not well organized. Because now the fire risk is multiplied because of the many taller buildings and high-raised buildings, but whereas we have not catered sufficient firefighting system. Not only that, the fire hazards are increasing due to transportation, because in India, the transportation, they do the hazardous equipments, not only hazardous equipments, hazardous fuels also carried through the road and transportation by trains. So the firefighting compliance is very much required. Otherwise, the fire risk will be more. Initially, the role of the fire services was restricted to extinguish the fire and protecting life. and property thereby. Dramatically, if you see the last few years, the role is increased, or additionally, they were given many other activities. But if we work out, we see that the sufficient fire stations and manpower and equipments to fire are not increased. Not only that, the role is now changed to space rescue incidents, trench and collapse operations, underwater rescue, and many more. So now they need to rework and ensure that sufficient firefighting systems and fire stations are available to ensure the fire control in India. National Building Code of India is given the detailed guidelines for construction, maintenance, and fire safety of the structures in the international level. The building code in India is published by Bureau of India Standards, and it is a recommendatory document. Guidelines were issued to the states to incorporate and ensure fire compliances in all the buildings as mandatory requirement. On 18th April 2017, all the state governments are instructed to incorporate and implement the latest National Building Code of India 2016, Part 4, in which fire and life safety were described in clear way for each and every type of industries and buildings. State bylaws, the State Fire and Emergency Act, in which bylaw means the guidelines by the state government and local authority, covered National Building Code of India, Model Building Bylaws 2016, Oil Industry Safety Directorate Guidelines, Petroleum Act and Rules, Explosive Act and Rules, and many more, where the fire prevention measures are clearly given, is taken into account and may clearly mentioned as a bylaw. The next we need to understand building bylaws. That means the municipal law and includes the development control, in which building rules and regulations are clearly mentioned in Section 3 of State Fire and Emergency Service Act. Fire service in the country is covered under the provision of Article 243W under the purview of various municipal bylaw for respective states. Out of almost all some 14 bylaws, it is a sixth one, fire concern. All the states are advised to create the bylaws, even though still many of the states are yet to complete. For example, in case of provision concerned to fire safety in Delhi, the Delhi Fire Service Act 2007 and the Delhi Fire Service Rules 2010 gives all the guidelines and what fire preventions are to be adhered by the industrialists, building owners, and commercial buildings. Like this, almost all 30 states now they covered under their bylaws. Still few states yet to cover. So realizing this, the model bill to provide for the maintenance of fire and emergency service for the state, revised one is issued in 2019. That time 24 states already covered the bylaws, but still many more pending. As on today also, few states yet to complete, like Kerala, even though they have the internal rules and regulations only, but bylaw is not created. Only with the instruction circulars only the fire compliance is taken care. The primary legislation in India, the State Fire and Emergency Service Act. In addition to that, the important guidelines which is mentioned international level to ensure in the National Building Code. The secondary legislations, the state fire and safety rules, regulations and circulars and notifications time to time issued by the states. There are license, sometimes they call it as a certificates, but because the bylaws, the states has their own words and they mentioned in the act different way. They are fire advice, fire NOC, fire license. Whenever any building or high-rise building or an industrialist or any factory wants to get the plan approval for the building, nowadays, that means at 2016 onwards, compulsorily the building approval should contain the fire safety measures. Other are also to be reflected in the building plan, and that will be a copy will be submitted to the fire department, who will go through the plan and he will verify in line with the guidelines all the fire safety measures are worked out or not. If it is not worked out, authority will give the advisory report along with the plan approval initially. Or in some states, they call it this one as a provisional no objection certificate. Once the plan approval comes from the concerned authorities along with the fire advice or provisional certificate, the construction can be carried out. On completion of the construction, the concerned owner has to intimate to the fire department. The fire authority will come and inspect the building is completed, all the firefighting systems in line with the guidelines or the advice mentioned in the NBC and as well as the state bylaw, then they will issue the no objection certificate. In case, if it is required to be get the fire license, the fire NOC and fire license almost are both are similar in nature, but only name is given different activity by different states. So, but the fire license is issued from the fire service department. The fire concern authority will cross-verify the building in all respect of the firefighting appliances, and whatever the firefighting is serviceability check, then they will issue the fire license. Who are the authorities involved for our compliances? The Director General, that is, initially in 1962, the Director General civil defense was established by Ministry of Home Affairs. Later, on 7th January 2003, this office has been declared as an attached office of Ministry of Home Affairs under Disaster Management Division, and two more sections, that is cash and establishment, were also added. On 2nd September 2004, it was redesignated as Director General, National Emergency Response Force and Civil Defense. On 1st December 2006 onwards, it was redesignated as Director General, National Disaster Response Force and Civil Defense. Again, in 2014, on 26 February, it was redesignated as Director General, Fire Services, Civil Defense and Home Guards. In each and every state, Director General, Fire Service, Regional Fire Officer, District Fire Officer, Assistant District Fire Officer, Station Fire Officers. It may vary state to state as per their bylaws. But ultimately, the Fire NOC granting authority is headed by Deputy Chief Fire Officer or Chief Fire Officer and assisted by a fire inspector who inspects, verifies and supports for issuing the fire license or Fire NOC. The very interesting and important one is, and many of our industrialists or building owners think that the Fire NOC is not applicable to me. But the bylaws and the guidelines in the NBC very clearly shows high-rise buildings having a height of more than 15 meters or multi-story buildings are required to obtain Fire NOC from Fire Service Department of the respective state. See, there are two things are there. One is the height 15 meters, multi-story building. Then what is multi-story building? Yes, in the bylaws, they clearly mention in each and every state how many stories. Suppose, for example, if you see in a Delhi concern, residential buildings other than hotels and guest houses having height more than 15 meters are having ground plus 4 upper stories, including mezzanine floor. That means either 15 meters height and more or ground plus 4 upper stories. Even if it is less than that, then also it's supposed to get the Fire NOC or fire license. Like this, each and every state gives the clarity in the rules itself. Apart from this, according to NBC Part 4, buildings of the following categories compulsorily should observe fire and safety measures. That means they have to ensure the fire and safety measures that is to be inspected by the fire department or fire concern authority, and who will issue the certificate or NOC. That means many of our industrialists and building owners think that my building is less than 15 meters, so I need not to go for NOC. This is in their mind. Please, it is very clearly mentioned, not only 15 meters and above. If a building is a residential occupancy with part commercial usage, irrespective of the height, it has to be compliant. Educational buildings like schools, universities, colleges, etc., etc. compulsorily to be complied. Assembly buildings, let it be the irrespective of height, even if it is only single floor, they have to comply under Fire Act. For example of the assembly of buildings, cinema halls, ceremonial houses, etc. Business buildings having offices. Business building having offices, even if it is very small office, if it is a business building, compulsorily they have to comply. Institutional buildings, hospitals, nursing homes, even there is a blood test centers also supposed to comply in line with the Fire NOC, Fire Act. Mercantile buildings, example, shops, warehouses, etc. Many of our clients, many of the, I come to know, seen, many of the people say that my warehouse, there is no fire likely to occur. Why should I go for the Fire NOC? No, the Act clearly says after working out, and as we have seen that many places, how the fire occurred, how it was getting into the worst situation. Because of that, clearly they brought down, and even now and then they includes some more updates, and India wants the fire safety in India at the international level. All the industrial buildings, any building hazardous, compulsorily they have to comply with the Fire Act. Fire protections requirements for each and every building, it's clearly mentioned as appendices in the NBC, and similarly the same is reflected in the fire rules of the concerned state. As we have seen, if you realize, if you analyze 2018 and 2019, many fire accidents took the many lives, like the cracker factory fire accidents, gas leakage accidents, school building fire, etc., etc. So the government again worked out and realized to prevent these types of fire accidents, to ensure all the commercial buildings compulsorily should be comply with the Fire NOC in line with the NBC norms, and as well as if we go through latest Fire Act issued by the central with the guidelines, clearly mentions every commercial building should obtain Fire NOC from concerned department or judicial authority. Yes, if there is a small shop or small room, yes, we know there will be a firefighting equipment. There may be one firefighting equipment, or maybe a limited requirement of water or so and so we may be maintaining. But in case of, if there are a big malls, high-raised buildings which is having many floors, such a cases and all, there must be a fire supervisor or fire safety officer to be employed to ensure the fire maintenance, fire appliances maintenance in case of emergency, who will guide to initial firefighting with the available trained their employees. For example, in case of Maharashtra rules, if the building height is more than 30 meters, compulsorily a fire officer, that means the fire safety officer or fire supervisor, is to be employed, and who is trained by the Fire Training Institute. In India, 5 places there are fire institutes, are like in Nagpur, Guwahati, Delhi, like 5 places there is available. He might have been trained by them. Not only that, his duty is to train the workers in that building. At least 40% of the employees should know firefighting drills. And they have to give the fire drills or fire training to the workers once in month compulsorily. Otherwise, where there is fire safety officer is not required, such a place, the government insisting fire department to give firefighting training by the fire brigade. For example, in Karnataka, the firefighting drill, if any employees, 50 or more in any of the entity, compulsorily they should be trained by the fire brigade, at least 40%. Now, a week before, Ministry of the Karnataka clearly said 70% people should be trained. How to get the fire license or fire NOC or fire professional certificate or fire advice? In some states, it is online. Still, some of the states offline. In case of online, registration is to be done in the portal. As usual, we have to get it registered ourselves. Then only we will get the user ID and password. Then application is to be filled online. Supporting documents are to be uploaded. Fees is to be remitted online as specified or designated by the authority. Authority gives the guidelines. As per that, as per square meter area, the rates are already decided by the states. The fees is to be remitted online. The application is to be submitted for further process online itself. The application is seen internally. The fire brigade or chief fire general will instruct the local fire inspector, inspect the building and check all the firefighting equipments in line with the guidelines are fitted. Once it is fitted, he will recommend the application and forward. Thereby, DFO or RFO, DG, as the jurisdiction concern, approves and issues the certificate or license. In case, if it is offline, yes, the same what we are discussing, almost all remain same. Application is to be submitted to the CFO or deputy CFO along with the relevant documents. What are the documents generally to be submitted? In the following slide, I listed out, you will see. On submission to the, along with your request application, we have to submit all the compliance all the supporting documents to the authority. The fire inspector of the area will come inspect the building in all respect. Even we come across one of the industrialists is a complaint in all respect, but it was realized that the approach road is 6 feet only wider, but as per guidelines, it should be at least 12 feet widen. See, there is a logic also is that even when somebody arguing with the authority, every vehicles can go, why not fire tender? There is a logic is there. If there is a fire tender is already positioned and they were firefighting with the available water, there should be a supporting another vehicle has to come. If there is no sufficient place, how that vehicle will come and park, or how the vehicle will cross and go around and come back with the next round of the supporting water or whatever fume. So in all respect, the inspector will go through, then he will recommend. Thereby, the fire brigade will issue fire clearance certificate. The fire clearance certificate, on getting the fire clearance certificate, authority will check the fees and all other things. Then he will issue the fire NOC as applicable to that building. The documents required to obtain the fire NOC or fire certificate in India are 2 copies of the proposed plan. The plan clearly should be indicated all the firefighting equipment position, locations, access or escape marking, everything is to be clearly mentioned. Copy of existing NOC agreement, if there is a agreement between the landlord or owner of the building or now going to be occupied. In such a case, the existing NOC agreement has to be valid one. Architect certified checklist, where in which clearly mentioned the building is planned and built in all respect by the building bylaws, application form, building model, certificate of electric wirings, including quantity and standards, outside photograph of the building, address and identity proof of the directors, registered office address proof, and there is a questionnaire along with that one, which has to be filled in all respect, and building stability certificate. This is the compulsory requirement. Sometimes in some states it may vary or there may be additional requirements. Fees for the process of our application, it varies from state to state. Generally, in case of new license, 10 to 11 rupees per square meter. In case of renewal, fees is rupees 1 per square meter to be remitted, either it is online or DD as per the state rules. Supposed to be maintained some documents at the building or the factory or industry, that is inspection report. That means from the initial onwards, when we applied and we got the fire advice or provisional fire certificate, during that period the inspection is carried out. In the remarks is mentioned that is to be maintained. Not only that, in the report itself, the fire brigade or the fire inspector will mention when will be the next inspection due, or when will be the next inspection on the firefighting system. That is mentioned, that is schedule also mentioned. These are all supposed to be maintained along with our inspection report. Then serviceable status also for each and every firefighting system with the certificate. Some of the equipments comes with the certificate. In the certificate, along with the certificate, we have to ensure that next due date, the date as inspection is carried out to be mentioned. So once in 6 months, compulsory inspection by the fire department. That report also you are supposed to maintain at the site. Anytime any surprise visit comes, it has to be produced. Is it renewal is possible? Yes, renewal is possible. The validity of fire NOC varies state to state. Like in Telangana, the certificate is valid for 5 years. In case of Delhi, varies 1 to 5 years, depends upon type of the building, type of the industries. But however, in all the cases in all over India, the inspection is every once in 6 months, twice in a year mandatory. On inspection report, if it is satisfied, authority will renew the annually. Transfer. License can be transferred in case of death of the licensee. Even though we know the license is issued for the building, however, the license is issued on the name of the owner only. So transfer can be possible only in case of the death. Application is submitted. Wherever the states are online, we can submit the online. Where there is offline, we have to submit offline. For transferring of license, along with the copy of the license and death certificate and proof of legal is to be submitted, and fees is to be supposed to be paid, that 1% for the per square meter. Then authority will transfer on the name itself. Closure, when the entity is going to be closed, we can apply for the closure certificate. But in case if it is non-compliance, authority will come and inspect. He will give you the warning and time to rectify it 1 month. Within 1 month, if we are not rectifying or whatever the remorse is given, if it is not complied, then authority has the power to cancel the license. In such a case, we have to go for new license. Interesting one is the penalty clause here also. In general, imprisonment for 3 months, which may extend to 6 months, fine 50,000 rupees or both in case of any non-compliance. If it is non-compliance, not rectified, or it is a repeated one, the building will be demolished at the expense of the owner as per state by law. Not only that, in case of non-compliance, or if you don't, some of the states, if we don't inspect or check the serviceability of the firefighting equipments, and the report is if it is not submitted, if you don't have the such a safety officer, in such a case, in few states, the fine is 10 rupees to 50 rupees per square meter per month. In such a case, authority will detail a trained fire inspector, fire safety officer, who will inspect and give the report. In case of some of the states, it is clearly mentioned by laws 6 months to 3 years imprisonment and fine 20,000 to 50,000 rupees. In Maharashtra, rule section 36 clearly mentioned in case of this non-compliance, it may. In addition to that, if the jurisdiction authority approaches and final verdict has come, the building has to be demolished on the cost of the owner. The amount of the penalty is collected or recovered as an arrears of land revenue to the government. In case if somebody gives a false report to the fire department, like there is a fire code, or let it be telephonically or through writing or any means, if it is a false report, in such a case, the concerned person will be punished the imprisonment extend to 3 months or with fine, which may extend to 10,000 rupees or with both. Applicability of the fire NOC varies from, I told you clearly that even though if it is mentioned 15 meters state, every state, but however, if you see, it may vary state to state. That is the reason I captured here. In some states, 50 meters. In some states, they clearly mentioned all buildings, irrespective of the state height. In some, like Delhi, if you see each and every building, they clearly mention. In case of residential building, 15 meters or more. In case of hotels, 12 meters. In case of education institutions, 9 meters and above. All assembly buildings, irrespective of the height. Business building, 15 meters or ground plus 4 floors. Like this, industrial building, no height restriction. But if the square 250 square meters or more, then we have to go for the fire license. Like this, it is state to state, where in Kerala state, they given their local rule, they mentioned 24 meters. In West Bengal, instead of 15 meters, they mentioned only 14.5 meters. In Goa, if you see, 14.2 meters and above. So like this, it varies. The height also, restriction also varies. And they mention in their appendices and annexes very crystal clear what type of license you have to obtain and what are the compliance is to be complied. That means that what type of fire equipments are to be, firefighting equipments are to be fitted. It is clearly mentioned. Mr. Faisal, shall we go through if any questions from audience?
Yes, sir. Let's go through some questions. There are quite a few interesting questions that has actually come in. So we'll start off the question from Kamachi. Dear sir, in Sivakasi, my fire accidents happened, but what about the fire NOC for hazardous building?
No, fire NOC for compulsorily fire, this cracker company have to get it. They have to obtain from the fire concern officer. Local, there must be a, in the nearby city, there will be a fire officer will be there. There they have to approach, apply, and they get the fire advice. Then they will issue the fire NOC. It's compulsory. It's compulsory.
Correct. Now, there's another question. Every state has its own fire laws, and then there are notifications, GOs exempting certain buildings from the purview of fire NOC. Can you guide us on how to ascertain the applicability of fire NOC in a particular state?
Every state, along with the bylaw, appendices and annexes are given. If any of the states not given, in the bylaw itself, they clearly mention, you have to ensure in line with the National Building Code, Part 4. In Part 4, every industry is covered. And they clearly mention what type of fire appliances you are supposed to be maintained at the building.
Okay. Now, this question is actually split into another 3 parts. Does exemption of seeking an NOC means exemption from installing the fire safety measures too?
Come again? Exemption?
Does exemption of seeking an NOC means exemption from installing the fire safety measures too?
See, there is no exemption is given. That's why I told you in 2016, they given the directions. In 2019, after going through the many fire occurs and they lost many lives, then the government has clearly mentioned all the commercial buildings, even if they have already earlier fire exemption certificate, now they have to get it fire NOC, mandatory.
Correct. Another question, as per Fire Act, the liability to provide fire safety measures in a building is of owner, Section 3. If the same is not provided by the owner, and if any fire incident takes place, what is liability of occupier under Fire Act?
See, there are two things we have to here be clear in our mind. That's why when the list of documents are required, they clearly mention if there is any agreement, NOC agreement between the owner of the building and occupier of the building. In such a case, who is responsible? As per the agreement clause. Otherwise, nowadays, it's very crystal clear, if the owner of the building is not provided the fire appliances in the building, it is the duty of the occupier to ensure. For example, the owner of the building, for example, if you take a big mall, when the gentleman is gone for the approval of that building, he mentions this many floors, this many rooms, or this many shops, what type of shops he is going to be, he mentions. Accordingly, he gets the fire advice, then he completes the construction, then he approaches and obtain the fire NOC or fire certificate. Now let us take in that mall, there are 200 shop rooms are available. One person is having a different type of shop or hazardous likely to happen shop. In such a case, it is the duty of the occupier to get it from the fire department NOC. There are many cases happened. So ultimately, liability has gone to the occupier only.
Okay. Also another question, can you let us know the status of insurance of fire NOC in a state of Gujarat to buildings which have obtained factory license but no fire NOC?
In that case, as he is knowing very well, nowadays, not only nowadays, since beginning, many of we people don't go through the terms and conditions. In the terms and condition in Gujarat clearly mentions, if in your insurance, if a building you don't have the fire NOC, if fire occurs, loss will not be compensated.
Yes, sir. There's another question from Mukesh Arora. As per the NBC 2016, what is safe distance of above ground fire hydrant pipeline from building?
Yeah, that varies as per the hazardous or type of building and what type of business you are going to do or factory. See, the many places this doubt arises. The height means few people take it from the ground level. But actually, the height is some states calculated from the plinth. You might even come across in the building, the bottom, they made the plinth beam. From there, the height is calculated. That is the reason many places they get the doubt. Now in the NBC, they clearly mentioned, not only in the NBC, in the 2019, there is a revised given. In that one, they clearly mention for each type of building, each type of activity, what you are doing, as per that, the height, everything mentioned clearly, up to what height it has to be there. And if in case of the size of the building and volume of the building, on that basis only, it is clearly mentioned. Otherwise, generally, everywhere, if you see that from the ceiling, they give 1 meter, that is 3 feet below they were supposed to mention. But again, it varies state to state.
Very state to state, correct. Actually, Mukesh added another question along with it. What is the minimum distance of any industrial building?
Industry?
Yeah, industrial building.
Yeah, industrial building also, that depends upon the state. The distance is varies. As they call it as a safe distance, and type of business, type of manufacturing, type of industry, it varies.
It varies. Okay.
It given in the appendices clearly, in the appendix annexure, it is clearly mentioned in the NBC. what should be the thickness for that building, wall, everything clearly given.
Thank you, sir. Now, Nivedita has a question. Who should obtain the fire NOC or renewal? Is it the builder or the lease establishment?
We were discussing earlier, if it is the total building, the fire NOC or fire certificate initially obtained by the owner of the building. Now, agreement between both the people, what is there? On that basis, the renewal has to take place. Generally, authority will issue the notice to the occupier only, not to the owner of the building.
Okay. Jay Kumar has a question. If all buildings in a premises are less than 15-meter height, fire NOC is not required?
No, fire NOC is mandatory now. 2016 onwards and especially 2019 onwards, irrespective of the height, commercial building, compulsorily you have to obtain the fire NOC.
Correct. Deepak has a question. He wants to know about the requirements of firefighting systems in the buildings less than 15 meters height under NBC.
Yes, it is mentioned in the guidelines. That means that in the annexure, as an annexure, appendices depends upon the building and business, it is clearly mentioned.
It's clearly mentioned. Correct. Now, Subhashi has a question. For industrial building in Mumbai city, whether DCPR or NBC or both shall be followed. There is a lot of non-clarity in DCPR regarding fire, water tank, reservoir. Can you clarify, please?
Yeah, in Maharashtra special rules, especially, I think people may be aware of that in 2016, in one of the street, the fire occurred. So that time, only one fire tender could enter. Later on, no fire tender could enter because the one street itself, more than 300 business entities are there. So that time, there is no count how much loss has happened. No count of the lives also. It took long time to find out the lives. That is a reason they clearly, especially Maharashtra, like the safety officer, now they derived in case within some stipulated area, if the number of shops or number of industries available, in such a case, there will be a fire safety officer combined together with the group. For example, there are the 15 shops are there or 50 shops are there. They together, they have to hire one fire safety officer or fire supervisor. Not only that, there must be compulsorily 3,000 liter of water always available nearby that concerned area. Because in case of any fire tender comes, backup is required. This clearly they mentioned in the Maharashtra rules. If I am right, that is a rule number 36.
Yes, sir. Here's another question. We have one office at project site having 30% capacity. Is there fire NOC required?
Yes, required.
Required. Mr. Yogesh has a question. Can you give any guideline in terms of timeline on getting these NOC, provisional and final NOC? Is there deemed approval as it get delayed by authorities? Generally,
everywhere it is clearly mentioned. The timeline is state to state varies 21 days to 30 days. If the inspection is carried out and report copy is if you got it, if it is no response, then you can take it as the approved. That is only few states, not all the states.
Okay. Subhash Pai has a question. Client is insisting on having a 6-meter wide road, approach as well as internal roads, whereas DCPR mentions 6-meter clear width for fire tender movement. Can you please guide?
Yeah, it is a clearly mentioned. If there is a road around the building, that means if one vehicle can go And if another vehicle is coming, that vehicle can be moved around. In such a case, 6 meters is sufficient. In case, if there is dead end, you might have been seen some of the industries, some of the factories, or some places in the day, there is no way to go around. They have to come back in the same road. In such a case, compulsorily 12 meters mandatory.
Now, I know this question has been addressed by you, sir, but I think there's another clarity required on this. Mr. Rangarajan has asked, industrial building shed on Chennai taken on lease by the leasee. Who has to get the fire NOC, lessor or leasee? If lessor or owner has taken fire NOC, does the leasee or occupier have to take another NOC?
You see, if the lessor has taken the fire NOC, he might have been mentioned that building purpose. The same purpose is lessee is using. If it is valid, need not to go for another fire NOC. Otherwise, the lessor has to go for the fire NOC separately. With the old NOC, in such a case, the procedure will be and the process will be very short.
Okay. Shirishing has a question. For applying fire NOC, is it necessary to route the online application through concerned state fire department approved agents, or one can apply directly? Please advise.
You see, that's I told you, in few states already total online. In few of the states still it is offline. Where the online, you can apply online. Even in case of any alteration, amendment also you can apply. Any changes are required. If there is no change in the building, no change in the industry type mentioned in the initial state, then need not to go for any amendment or additional. If any change is there, you can apply. Whichever the state is having online, we can apply online. Whichever the state is offline, we have to submit in person.
Okay. Now, Arvind has a question. Is NBC 2016 mandatory or recommendatory, especially in Himachal Pradesh hilly regions?
It is mandatory even for J&K Kashmir. Clearly they mention it is a total for all over India, including union territories.
Yes, sir. Kailash Raj is a question. In case of starting a new business, whether we need to get all the three requirements, fire advice, fire NOC, and fire license.
See, that depends upon type of the business and type of the building only. In case new, when you are applying some activities or some business, you may not require professional NOC. The authority may accept your plan and he may issue the approval to continue the building construction. On completion of the construction, he will give you the NOC straight away. This is one way. In some cases, why he gives the provisional? Because the building, for example, one of the case I have seen in the city, even though they have the fire NOC, they gone for additional. The additional one is that the business is something different. In such a case, authority clearly warned you have not come for the changes because their business itself changes, a part of the building. So that depends upon type of business, what you are going to do. On that basis only, authority takes a call, and that also it varies state to state. Some states, just if you submit the application, in the acknowledgement he mentioned, you can go for the construction. In some type of business, authority will give the advice. That is the jurisdiction of the authority, and as well as the state bylaws, what the rules and regulations given. As per that, authority will act.
Okay. Now, Bharat Patel has a question. What if fire NOC applied for, not granted by authority due to dispute among the granting authority? Like in case of factory, fire NOC in Ahmedabad, no clarity given It is in the dish or fire department, give the fire NOC and PIL going in at the High Court of Gujarat.
You see, this is something different is point. If he complied in all respect, as per the guidelines, if the construction is completed, he can very well approach the that higher authority, that is judicial. Even in the state bylaws clearly mentioned, in case if authority fails to give the punishment, even it is mentioned in the act itself for the authority also. So only judicial will take the final call on this.
He has mentioned it's an old factory reapplied.
If it is an old factory, yes. Now, as per the guidelines in the 2016 onwards, and especially in 2019, the latest, the revised guidelines is given. They have to seek again new, or they have to apply and get the confirmation from the authority.
I hope, Mr. Bharat, this question is addressed to your satisfaction. There is another question by Balasubramanian. Is there a TAC service in place?
Lay. Come again?
Is there a TAC service in place?
In lay, it is available.
It's available. Okay. Prashant has a question. Why is there no single fire safety act all over India?
Single, fine.
Single fire safety act all over India.
No, there is no single fire safety all over India. Achha, why is asking why it is not there?
Yes,
yeah.
Why it's not there?
No, because if you see that 243 of your constitution, the 234W, why it is made the climatic condition and geographical. Because of this reason, they decided it cannot be common to all over India. That is the main reason. The concept behind this, if you see that there are some 14 bylaws are there. Out of that, 6th or 7th one is one of that is the fire concern. These are all concept is clear that due to climatic and geographical reason only.
Okay. Kailash has a question. If in case of fire advice, to whom it should be educated? For an example, from top to bottom of hierarchy staffs of the organization or to only the concerned staffs?
It is a total scientist taken into account, including your chairman, in case in the building who are all going to be seated. The total account only taken, not only workers. Fire concern, total count in that building.
Okay. Dilip Kumar has a question. Like a mall where multiple commercial establishments having the businesses, whether it's necessary to take the fire NOC by all individual or single NOC obtained by building owner is sufficient in terms of compliance.
Yes, we discussed earlier, if in is a mall, the business, for what type of business the owner is already mentioned in his application and obtained fire NOC, if only that business is going on in the total mall, in that case, need not to go for fire NOC by individual shop owner. If it is varies, the individual shop owner has to submit the application along with the original fire NOC for that building, and if required, authority may advise or may ask the concerned person to maintain some fire fighting appliances, or may not require, then he will give the NOC.
Okay. Yogesh has a question. We pay for fire NOC, but in their it is their obligation on fire department to keep fire tender nearby. In my case, it takes minimum 3 hours to reach fire tender.
I think as per the act, it is clearly mentioned, even in the rural area, the fire tender supposed to reach that location within 20 to 30 minutes. If as he says that if it is happened, he can very well file a case or launch a RTI or complain to his next level authority or fire brigade or to the chief fire officer. He can very well raise a complaint, and they will ensure that at least in future such a thing will not happen, or they may finalize in case of whatever the loss, compensation also may be granted. And another interesting one is that India is only the one country where if the fire service is given by fire brigade or the fire station, no charges to any individual or any building owner or any industry. But whereas in other countries, it is little bit of various. In case of any support is given, they may send the bill on completion of that one, but in India, it is free of cost.
Okay. We'll move on to the final question, sir. What is the way to regularize any deviation in the building from the basic approval from town planning authority?
Yeah. Yes. Deviation means you can submit the application and advice again. Authority will give you fire authority will give you the advice. Suppose, because you can say very well, even it happened to some of our clients where there was no provision, the temporary sheets also they asked to make between there is one big building, one of our case, there is a big building, one of our client in Bangalore, the authority visited, they felt that they cannot make the in between one more wall. So they given temporary wall as a sheet. It will be lying from top to bottom. There they can fit the firefighting systems. So the fire brigade is the right person who can visit and give the advice. On that basis, if you complete, the deviation will be cleared and you will be issued with the fire certificate.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights and knowledge. In case attendees have any questions that are not being addressed right now, they will be mailed to you after the session with the answers. So we'll be able to keep you informed about or informed on your queries. Thank you, Sridharan, sir. Much appreciated on you coming over to our 60 Minutes Compliance EHS series and taking a very well-informed session towards the audience.
Thanks, Faisal.
Thank you, everybody.
In today's business scenario, as organizations
strategize to improve profitability, one of the biggest challenges is achieving 100% regulatory compliance. The major hurdles faced are the vastness and complexity of standards, continuous amendments to regulatory compliance laws, and lack of robust digital tools. Besides, non-compliance may lead to legal exposure and prosecution of the board of directors. This can result in heavy fines and penalties and a drop in market value and share prices. Now companies can tackle these challenges with Comfy, a tech-enabled plug-and-play global compliance management system with Regulatory Compliance Advisor. Comfy is a product of Aparajita Group of Companies, the #1 regulatory compliance company in India, offering solutions across key domains. Comfy is the only global compliance management system that enables companies to track, govern, and manage regulatory requirements, performance evaluations, and internal operations, thereby mitigating future risks. Comfy provides full regulatory compliance assurance and precise knowledge mapping with real-time updates. The technology is embedded with comprehensive legal knowledge and assists in mapping industry-specific laws with a host of other key features. A key highlight of Comfy is tracking regulatory compliance performance with a multi-dimensional dashboard for management review. This helps companies act proactively and reduces financial risks and liability costs. leading to improved stock value and customer trust. Some of the key USPs of Comfy are as follows. Comfy dynamically drives and manages regulatory compliance performance with auto-trigger, tracking, and escalating of regulatory compliance gaps. Comprehensive regulatory compliance knowledge covers all types and categories regulatory knowledge for effective compliance management globally. Easy-to-use intelligent, real-time, and color-coded dashboard and trend charts with drill-down capabilities. Timely auto-updates with notifications and comprehensive reporting and alert system. Automated and on-demand analytics and reporting capabilities available to flag non-compliance and risk. Comfy's readily available reports can be used for internal and external audit, gap assessment, and due diligence analysis. It supports in identifying risks and allows for a proper mitigation system to be set in place to avoid non-compliance. Mobile apps. Comfy is available on iOS and Android-based mobile apps to manage your regulatory compliance while you're on the go. Dedicated data server with AWS that acts as a repository for historic organizational data that serves as comprehensive databank of regulatory compliance documents. With its applicability across 100+ industries, regulatory compliance management becomes effortless with Comfy. Comfy's robust inbuilt mechanism ensures continuity and visibility of regulatory compliance in companies across the world. Apart from catering to various domains and modules, it can also be customized to suit specific needs. Let's take a quick look at Comfy's interface and usability. Comfy suggests applicable statutes for every branch of the organization, along with instant updates on new regulations and any changes. It customizes regulatory compliance assignment to users. Regulatory